In today's video, an adventure-loving daredevil meets his final affliction in the most horrifying way imaginable. He was devoured by a 15-foot, 2,000-pound crocodile while on an adventure with his friends. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying crocodile attack on Hendry Coetzee. Welcome to Final Affliction. Hendry Coetzee always knew death was coming for him. He often spoke of it, knowing his adventurous lifestyle was pushing him to his premature end. But his cravings for adventure overcame him. In his memoirs, he wrote of feeling a deep depression as soon as each expedition was over. He was only ever happy when he was alone, pushing himself to his limits and way beyond. Hendry grew up in South Africa. He found school tedious and boring, but thrived in the arts. After graduating, he went traveling before joining the military. At the age of 21, he was back on the dark continent and was looking for adventure. In 1997, the mighty Zambezi River, bordering Zambia and Zimbabwe, was fast becoming a hotspot for thrill-seeking tourists. Outfitters set up bungee jumps and skydives over the awesome Victoria Falls, but most popular of all was whitewater rafting. As a cocky 21-year-old Hendry, who had never kayaked or rafted a river in his life, landed himself a job with Peter Meredith's whitewater rafting company. After learning how to roll and ride a kayak in a swimming pool, Hendry took to one of the world's most advanced commercial rivers. He guided tourists through Grade 5 rapids and quickly became a popular guide. Peter described Hendry as having more balls than brains, and on one occasion, whilst the entire group portaged their rafts and kayaks around a deadly Class 6 rapid, Hendry ran at it in his kayak without telling anyone. He barely made it through, but thought he was the bee's knees. Peter warned him he'd be fired if he ever pulled a stunt like that again. Peter and Hendry became good friends. In 2004, they embarked on an epic adventure with a small team. The task was to follow the River Nile from source to sea. They paddled the 4,130 miles from Lake Victoria to the Mediterranean together. This preceded Hendry's solo paddle of the Congo a few years later. The journey took him 5 months to complete. He survived being ambushed and hunted by cannibalistic Gombe tribesmen. He dodged hippos and crocodiles. He slept on the banks of the river, protected only by his bivouac and the flames of his fire. After returning home, Hendry decided that it was time to settle down. This adventurous lifestyle couldn't last forever, and he was taking too many risks. He had met a girl and realized that there was perhaps more to life than adrenaline-filled expeditions. But these feelings weren't to last long. In 2010, an email pinged in his inbox. Two professional American kayakers, Ben Stokesbury and Chris Korbelik, wanted to navigate the upper Congo River. They knew Hendry was the perfect guide for the job. Hendry stood fast on his original decision, no more kayaking or exploration, but he was happy to help them plan their route. He wrote a detailed itinerary for them, adding detail that only an explorer of his caliber would know. As he mapped out their journey, Hendry felt that familiar restlessness return. The call of the wild echoed once more in his ears. After months of helping them plan their trip, Hendry finally relented and succumbed to the promise of an epic adventure. The trio set out on the 2-month trip through the Congo's tributaries. They began along the Ruzizi River at the end of October 2010. They planned to be home by Christmas. Hendry's girlfriend was looking forward to seeing him again after what he promised to be his final expedition. It turns out he was right. Whenever the three kayakers paused along the river to rest or make camp, they would speak with locals who lived on the riverbanks. They had an agreement with the International Rescue Committee, who helped refugees and rural communities. In exchange for some logistical help, Hendry had promised feedback from locals. Upon speaking to one community, they were told that, as well as needing clean water and education, they also needed help tackling a major crocodile problem. In the past 20 years, 125 people had been taken by this prolific predator. Hendry and the other made a mental note of this comment. What they didn't know was the years of battles in the region between neighboring communities had resulted in more than 5.4 million people being killed. Most of these people had been dumped in the rivers. Most of these people had been eaten by crocodiles. As a result, these reptilian beasts had grown to enormous sizes and had a taste for human blood. On December 7, 2010, the trio had been paddling for some time when they came to a sharp bend in the river. Although Ben and Chris were professional paddlers and well known in the world of extreme sports, Hendry had to teach them how to kayak in the African wilderness. He taught them to regularly tap their kayaks to create noise, stay away from eddies where hippos might attack, and keep clear of sunbathing crocodiles on the riverbanks. On the day of the attack, the three of them had spotted a few 3-foot crocodiles on the muddy banks. They were harmless, and the trio glided by, admiring the natural scene from their plastic boats. If a larger croc was spotted in the water, protocol was for the three kayakers to come together and paddle as fast as they could to outrun the potential threat. So far, the journey had been broken up into hair-raising whitewater obstacles and calm, gentle stretches that meandered silently through the still African bush. Around the corner, the river was about 100 feet wide and flowed gently. The three men were paddling close to one another. They had to concentrate so that their blades didn't touch. Ben was slightly in front, Hendry in the center, and Chris trailing a few yards behind. Ben's eyes darted from left to right as he scanned the waterways and sloping embankment for any sign of trouble. The water was so calm, with the only ripples emanating from the men's paddles. There were no telltale signs of predatory crocodiles or territorial hippos. Usually they would spot the knobby protrusions of a crocodile's log-like head and two gleaming eyes just above the water's surface, but today was different. Unbeknownst to them, something was stirring underwater. Something was stalking them from the murky depths. Nothing could have alerted them to this stealthy predator, not a ripple nor a bubble, until it was too late. Ben looked back over his shoulder to check the others were keeping form. As he did so, he saw an enormous crocodile silently emerge from the water just to Hendry's left-hand side. Hendry gasped at its sudden appearance and cried, "Oh my God!" It wasn't a cry of fear, terror, or desperation. It was more a matter-of-fact exclamation. To suddenly see the biggest crocodile lift its head out of the water had taken Hendry completely by surprise. Those were the only words he managed to shout. In an instant, the crocodile had grabbed Hendry's left shoulder in its jaws. It pulled him underwater quickly like lightning. The immense pressure from a bite force of over 4,000 psi seized Hendry, crushing his chest and neck. Hendry was fastened snugly into the cockpit of his kayak. Ben and Chris watched in abject terror as the upturned kayak shook and tumbled above the water for a few agonizing seconds. Then the kayak was pulled downwards and out of sight. Moments later, the red plastic boat bobbed back up to the surface and righted itself. The cockpit was empty. Hendry was nowhere to be seen. Hendry was likely to have been taken to the bottom of the river where the crocodile began its feast, knocking the air from his lungs, disorientating him with sharp twists and rolls in an attempt to drown its prey. Mercifully, Hendry likely passed out from the immense compression on his body before being taken down under. Judging by the size of its head, the crocodile was estimated to be about 15 feet long, weighing in excess of 2,000 pounds. Ben and Chris made a mad dash for it. Paddling with all their might, they churned through the green Lukuga River. Frantically, they made their way to the riverside village of Kabea Maji. Firing their kayaks at the riverbank, they leapt out and ran into the village, shouting for help. The locals fled in a mad panic. The two white men, donning life jackets and helmets, had taken them completely by surprise. But when everyone had calmed down, Ben and Chris managed to ask for a motorboat to go and look for Hendry. The villagers shuffled uneasily and shook their heads. They told them that they no longer set foot on the river, because in the last 5 years alone, 7 of them had been taken by the crocodiles, simply plucked from the decks of their boats. Ben and Chris dashed onto a nearby bridge, desperately looking upstream for their fallen friend. The entire village, some 200 people, followed them. Then they saw something. From around the corner, something floated into view. A black paddle, and then Hendry's red kayak bobbed up and down on the river, floating closer and closer, and then passing under the bridge, right beneath Ben and Chris's feet. It was immaculate, no sign of a struggle, no scratches, no cracks, no blood. Hendry was never seen again. Sensing something wasn't right, Hendry's girlfriend logged onto Facebook. Her heart skipped a beat as messages of condolence for Hendry appeared on her screen. This couldn't be happening. This must be some kind of mistake. They were supposed to be meeting soon. He was nearing the end of his expedition, his very last expedition. Distraught and devastated, Hendry's girlfriend still journeyed to the Ugandan bar on New Year's Eve, where they were planning on meeting. Through the dimmed lighting and steady bass beat of the music, she searched the hazy dance floor for Hendry, still hoping upon hope that she would see that dazzling, confident smile pop up from the crowds. The clock struck 12, the partygoers erupted in cheers, but Hendry was nowhere to be seen. He had met his unfortunate final affliction.